They mocked her voice. A black woman stood in the middle of the crowded airport, merely asking the check-in agent about the first-class seat she had booked. The agent let out a slight, bitter laugh. "That's a strange accent. Sorry. Your first-class seat has been cancelled. You'll have to sit in economy." People around glanced at her. Some shook their heads in pity, others smiled with disdain. They thought she was just another ordinary person, not worth paying attention to. But no one knew that within 48 hours, this airline would lose nearly $1 billion in revenue. And the woman they just humiliated, she did not scream, nor did she react impulsively. Her name was Maya Thompson. And this is the story of how Maya made an entire system kneel, using nothing but her silence and intelligence. Maya Thompson was 52 years old. She was the CEO of Horizon Global, a travel and logistics conglomerate worth over $950 million. But no one at this airport knew that. All they saw was a black woman with neatly braided hair, a deep blue silk scarf draped lightly over her shoulder, and worn-out leather shoes. Maya had grown up in a poor neighborhood in the south of Chicago. Her mother worked night shifts as a nurse, and her father drove a bus for 25 years. From a young age, Maya had learned to observe. She knew how to listen, to remember every detail, every disdainful glance or mocking word people assumed she didn't understand. That very silence had raised her. She understood that the quickest reaction wasn't always the wisest. Sometimes stepping back to see the whole picture was how you won without ever having to speak. That morning, Maya arrived at the airport very early. Her flight departed at 8, but she was there by 6:30. She always kept this habit so that no one could use lateness as an excuse to delay her plans. She walked up to the first-class check-in counter, handing her ticket and passport to the agent. The young woman named Amber glanced at Maya, then back at the screen, her eyes filled with undisguised contempt. When Maya gently asked about her seat, Amber let out a cold chuckle. "Oh, you have such an interesting voice," Amber said, dragging out the word interesting as if it were an insult. Then she typed quickly on her keyboard without looking at Maya, her voice icy. "Your seat 1A has been cancelled. Now you only have seat 44E in economy." Maya felt the atmosphere around her shift. The people queuing behind her started whispering. A middle-aged man chuckled softly, shaking his head as if watching a cheap joke whose ending everyone already knew. Maya said nothing. She just looked at Amber, her eyes calm but deep. Inside she felt no anger or humiliation. She only saw a familiar truth. This world still thought it could define her worth by her skin color and her voice. Amber sighed theatrically, looked down at the screen, tapped a few keys, then handed the ticket back to Maya without looking up. "Here's your new boarding pass. Make sure you get to the gate on time." Maya took the ticket, nodded slightly, and pulled her suitcase away. People around her avoided her gaze. They didn't want to look into that silence because deep down they knew it was heavier than any protest. She walked to an empty row of seats near the window, sat down, and turned on her phone. The screen lit up with a message from her personal assistant containing just one word: ready. Maya stared at the message, her lips pressed together. She rested the phone on her lap, leaning back into her seat, eyes gazing up at the high ceiling of the departure hall. The announcement speakers echoed endlessly, calling passengers' names, announcing flights. But to Maya, everything faded into silence. She didn't rush to reply. She closed her eyes, letting her breath slow down. In her mind, every step was already clear. She didn't need to scream that she had been humiliated. She didn't need to demand justice right there at the small check-in counter, because she knew that within a few hours, the entire system they were so proud of would have to bow down, not because she wanted revenge, but because she would never allow this humiliation to be considered normal, to be repeated on anyone else after her. Silence was not weakness. It was the step back to prepare for the greatest strike forward. Maya opened her eyes, her gaze sharp yet calm. She picked up her phone and typed a short message. Within seconds, a flurry of new notifications appeared. The chief legal officer, operations director, and head of partnerships at Horizon Global had received her orders. She set her phone down, folded her arms across her chest, and looked out the window where the morning sun was rising. Planes lined up on the runway, symbols of power in a colossal industry. But Maya knew real power wasn't in steel, engines, or the flashy logos on the wings. It lay in invisible decisions. In the way one person quietly withdrew their cooperation, withdrawing hundreds of millions of dollars, causing the smoothly spinning wheels to grind to a halt. She told herself that today she would just sit here and wait, because storms don't always announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Storms arrive when everything seems most peaceful. Amber continued her work at the check-in counter. She no longer paid attention to Maya. To Amber, the story ended when the first-class ticket turned into an economy seat. She felt satisfied seeing Maya's silent demeanor, thinking she had won, but across the airport, the phone of the airline's partnership director was vibrating nonstop. An email from Horizon Global appeared on the screen with a short subject line. Suspension of all partnerships, immediate effect. The director skimmed through it, his face turning pale. Horizon Global was their largest corporate client, accounting for nearly 25% of their monthly business class and international premium route revenue. With just one email, the entire forecast for the next quarter turned into a sea of red. Meanwhile, Amber was still laughing and talking to the next passenger, completely unaware that the storm she had accidentally unleashed was silently rising right beneath her feet. Maya looked at Amber from afar, her eyes free of hatred. She had no time to hate an individual. What she cared about was the system that had allowed such attitudes to exist and spread. Her phone buzzed again. Her personal assistant had sent a detailed report. All premium bookings for the month, related logistics transport contracts, and a list of media partners had been quietly notified. Everything happened in silence, without a single social media post, without a single public criticism. Maya took a sip from the coffee she had just bought. The bitter warmth spread through her chest. She remembered her mother's words when she was little. You don't need to shout to prove you're strong. Silence can make the world tremble, if you have enough wisdom and justice. Today she was living those words to the fullest, in an airport indifferent to human dignity. At the airline's operations headquarters, an emergency video conference was convened. The sales director, legal director, and the head of operations were all present. Everyone frowned, voices tense. They didn't understand what had happened. Why did Horizon Global suddenly suspend all partnerships? One director asked, his voice panicked. Don't they need to give us a warning? This is hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. Across the screen, the head of partnerships flipped quickly through the email, reading each line aloud. But no one in that room knew that just a few hundred meters away, the woman behind it all was still sitting quietly, sipping her coffee, watching passengers queued aboard. Maya was in no rush. She had spent her whole life learning patience, and she knew that their reactions now were only the beginning. Because when power is pulled from the foundation, no building can stand for long. Amber finally sensed something was wrong when she saw a group of senior managers walking briskly past the check-in counter, their faces tense. One of them whispered something to her direct supervisor. The supervisor glanced at Amber with irritation before turning away immediately. Amber felt her heart race, but she tried to remain calm, continuing to scan tickets for passengers. Inside, she wondered what was happening that had all the management in such turmoil. In the distance, Maya stood up. She adjusted her coat, picked up her suitcase, and walked towards the gate. She wasn't planning to leave just yet. She just wanted to observe everything gradually cracking beneath its calm surface. She knew that when a system begins to shake, those who believed in its invincibility are the ones who become the most afraid. And Maya understood. That fear was the most effective wake-up call for a world asleep in its own complicity. Maya walked slowly down the hallway, the morning sunlight casting a calm glow on her face. Each of her steps echoed softly against the stone floor, blending with the boarding announcements from the nearby gate. No one paid attention to her, just as they hadn't paid attention when she was humiliated right before their eyes. She stopped in front of a bookstore, looking through the glass. Inside, a little boy sat cross-legged on the floor, engrossed in an adventure novel. His eyes sparkled, innocent, believing in a just world where good people always win. Maya smiled faintly, silently reminding herself that she wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for children like that boy, so they could grow up in a society where dignity wasn't something to be fought for, but the default right of every human being. She turned away and kept walking when her phone vibrated again. A message from the chief legal officer. Press ready. Maya didn't rush to reply. She put her phone back in her pocket and walked closer to the glass windows overlooking the runway. Planes were moving slowly, preparing for takeoff. She thought of the thousands of people sitting inside them, trusting that this system would always operate flawlessly. She knew that even the smallest change could shake everything. But today, she wasn't just creating a small change. She was resetting the entire board. Behind her, Amber was still busy scanning tickets. Her supervisor walked over and whispered a few words. Amber nodded, but sweat began to bead on her forehead. She could feel the tension spreading like an oil slick, even though everything was happening in silence. Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Silence was not surrender. Silence was the space to observe every link in the chain and choose the exact moment to strike. In the airline's operations room, the senior directors were still fiercely debating. One of them slammed his hand on the table. We can't let Horizon Global walk away. They account for nearly a quarter of our premium route profits. Does anyone know what happened? No one answered. All eyes turned to the head of customer relations. He lowered his head, his voice trembling. I just got the report. Apparently there was an incident with a high-profile passenger this morning. A check-in agent canceled their first-class seat without any official reason. The entire room fell silent. The operations director clenched his jaw. Who? What was the passenger's name? The head of customer relations swallowed hard, scrolled back to the email, and read aloud, Maya Thompson. The name rang out like a cold blade cutting through the air. Everyone in the room looked at each other, realizing at once this was no ordinary passenger. This was a woman who could determine the fate of the entire airline. Maya sat down in the waiting area near the gate, placing her suitcase by her feet. She opened her phone ads and read the message from the chief legal officer. It contained the draft press release. The title was concise. Horizon Global terminates partnership with Airline X for failing to uphold standards of dignity and fairness. She skimmed through it, adjusting a few words to ensure the tone remained sharp yet calm. For Maya, this wasn't an impulsive action driven by personal pride. This was a declaration of the values her corporation stood for. When 25% of premium route revenue disappears with a single email, no CEO can ignore it. She pressed send, adding one final line, publish in 30 minutes. She closed her phone, leaned back in her seat, and looked up at the gleaming ceiling. Everything remained quiet, as if nothing had happened. But Maya knew that in 30 minutes this silence would shatter under the weight of urgent calls they never saw coming. Amber began to feel restless when her supervisor returned, standing right behind her. His voice was low and harsh. Amber, what did you do this morning to a passenger named Maya Thompson? She jumped, turning around, trying to remain calm. I just changed her seat. The system showed an error, so I moved her to economy. Her supervisor looked straight into her eyes, his gaze ice cold. Do you know who she is? Amber swallowed hard and shook her head. The supervisor sighed, his face tight with tension. She's the CEO of Horizon Global. And because of your actions, this entire company is about to lose its biggest contract tract. Amber felt her legs go weak. She gripped the check-in counter to keep from collapsing. In her mind, only one question echoed. How could just one woman, with nothing but silence, make an entire powerful system tremble in fear? Maya remained seated in the waiting area, watching the flow of people passing by. Her gaze revealed no emotion, but inside her thoughts moved swiftly like a sophisticated machine. She remembered the times when she was still an intern, when she too was rejected and belittled. Back then she believed that if she worked 10 times harder, they would acknowledge her. But after many years, Maya realized that the problem was never her effort, but a system that was never ready to recognize someone like her. Her phone vibrated. Her personal assistant reported, all media partners have been informed. The press release will go out in 20 minutes. Maya nodded slightly, her eyes still looking straight ahead. She knew this wasn't a battle for a first-class seat. This was a battle to redefine human dignity in a world that had grown accustomed to silence in the face of injustice. In the airline's operations room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The sales director was calling Horizon Global repeatedly, but no one was answering. His voice was hoarse with worry. They're not responding. They're deliberately closing all lines of communication. The head of legal stared at his laptop, sweat trickling down his temple. Their press release will go live in a few minutes. If we don't respond in a time, our stock will plunge at market open. Everyone fell silent. They all understood this wasn't just trouble with a big client. This was a direct blow to the honor and reputation of the entire system. They had always believed themselves to be untouchable. Outside, Maya still sat quietly, her hands clasped over her suitcase. She didn't need to witness their panic to feel satisfied. She only needed to know that her silence had spoken loudly enough to ensure they would never forget. Amber watched as her supervisor turned and walked away, her heart pounding. She tried to continue scanning tickets for passengers, but her hands were shaking. Every time she saw Maya Thompson's name on the screen, she felt a chill down her spine. Not far away, Maya remained seated, her eyes gazing out at the runway glowing under the morning sun. She thought of her mother. Her mother once said, "When they belittle you, don't waste time proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. Work so that the system they rely on is forced to kneel before you." Maya's phone vibrated. A message from the chief legal officer. 5 minutes to national broadcast. She set her phone down on her lap and breathed slowly. No complaints, no tears, no impulsive rage. Maya knew that real change didn't come from shouting. It came from silent decisions strong enough to break an entire unjust foundation. Across the city at Horizon Global headquarters, the communications team was making final preparations. The large screen in the center of the room displayed the headline, Horizon Global announces termination of partnership with Airline X for violating standards of dignity. The head of communications that turned to the crisis PR team. Are we ready? One team member nodded. All press partners, television networks, and digital platforms have received the embargo. In 5 minutes, the news will go live simultaneously. The department head checked the time, then looked up, his voice firm. Good. This isn't a strike for revenge. This is a strike to change how this entire industry treats human beings. At the airport, Maya glanced at her watch. The second hand ticked by slowly. She closed her eyes and told herself, it's time. Amber kept her head down, scanning tickets quickly, but her mind was in turmoil. She saw her supervisor and the head of check-in discussing tensely at the counter's corner, occasionally glancing her way. Fear rose up in her throat. She never imagined that one careless, contemptuous remark could turn everything upside down. In the waiting area, Maya opened her phone. A notification appeared. Press releases live. She saw the logos of major news outlets appear one after another, all with the same headline. Horizon Global ends all partnership with airlines over discriminatory treatment of CEO Maya Thompson. The terminal remained noisy, people dragging suitcases, checking in, boarding. But for Maya, the world slowed down. She took a deep breath, feeling her heartbeat steady. This wasn't victory, this was only the first warning. Because she wasn't here for revenge. She was here to change the way this world operates forever. In the airline's operations room, the phones rang incessantly. The communications director was trying to reassure internal partners. We will handle this crisis. Don't panic. Don't make any statements without direction. But fear spread faster than his reassurances. On Twitter, hashtags Horizon Global and hashtag Discrimination Aid X Airlines started appearing. Prominent journalists retweeted with questions. What is happening with X Airlines? How did they lose $1 billion client in just one morning? At the airport, Maya stood up. She adjusted her coat and slowly walked toward the gate holding her suitcase. The sunlight shone on her face, revealing firm yet calm features. She didn't look at Amber again. That woman no longer mattered. What Maya was targeting was far bigger than a single person. It was the system that had allowed this contempt to exist for decades without anyone stopping it. Amber watched Maya's silhouette fade into the distance, a lump forming in her throat. She wondered if everything would have been different had she just smiled and done her job properly that morning. But deep down, Amber knew she had chosen contempt. No one forced her to act that way. Meanwhile, Maya walked to the large glass window overlooking the runway. Planes were taxiing, preparing for takeoff. She set down her suitcase and folded her arms across her chest. Her phone vibrated with a message from her assistant. X Airlines stock down 7% in 15 minutes. Maya did not smile. She just breathed slowly, her eyes gazing into the distance. To her, this wasn't joy. Every percentage point they lost was proof of a cruel reality. Human dignity had never been valued equally to profit. Today she forced them to remember that the silence of those belittled was never agreement. It was only temporary before they rose with a power many times greater. At airline headquarters, the emergency meeting dragged on. The legal director skimmed through the incident report, his voice trembling. The CEO of Horizon Global didn't scream or cause a scene. She simply walked away from the check-in counter, and then everything collapsed. The sales director slammed his hand on the table. This is a failure of the entire system. We belittled a woman just because she didn't fit the image we had of a first-class passenger. No one spoke. Each wondered how many times they had seen this happen to others, and remained silent. Today, silence was no longer safety. Silence had become complicity. At the airport, Maya checked her phone. A new message from the chief legal officer. Media requesting interviews. Direction? She typed quickly. No statement needed. My actions speak for me. She put her phone away, picked up her suitcase, and continued walking. For her, words had never changed the world. Decisions did. Amber left the check-in counter and rushed into the staff lounge. She closed the door and leaned against the wall, her heart pounding. In the mirror, her face was pale. She remembered Maya's calm gaze when receiving the economy ticket. No anger, no arguing, just silence. Amber realized she feared that silence more than any scolding. It made her feel small, made her see her malice laid bare and raw. She sat down on a chair, covering her face with her hands. Outside, her supervisor's phone rang in the hallway. People were talking about the crisis, about the lost contract, about the plunging stock price. But in Amber's mind, only one question echoed. Why did I do that? Why was one contemptuous remark worth losing everything? At the gate, Maya sat down in the waiting area, eyes fixed ahead. She knew that sometimes the strongest person didn't need to wield a weapon. Timely silence alone was enough to make the world tremble. In the emergency meeting room, the operations director gripped his pen tightly, his voice hoarse with stress. We need to find a way to reconnect with Horizon Global. Apologize, negotiate, compensate, anything. The head of customer relations shook his head, his voice desperate. They're not responding on any channel. Their CEO, Maya Thompson, has blocked all access. The sales director slammed his pen on the table, the sound echoing sharply. We made the biggest mistake, underestimating someone we knew nothing about. Outside at the airport, Maya stood up, pulling her suitcase as she walked down the long hallway toward the executive lounge. Her phone vibrated with a message from the head of legal. Internal airline report leaked. Check-in staff suspended. Chaos internally. Maya glanced at the message but did not reply. She only thought, if she had chosen to argue today, it would have ended at the check-in counter. But through silence, she not only protected her dignity, she forced the entire system to confront its own rot. Maya entered the executive lounge, a quiet space with black leather chairs, warm yellow lighting, and soft piano music. The receptionist smiled at her, unaware that this woman was shaking the entire airline to its core. She chose a seat by the window, placed her suitcase beside her, and poured herself a cup of hot tea. Steam rose, dissolving into the cool air. She took a sip, the slight bitterness soaking her tongue, spreading down her throat, bringing absolute clarity. Her phone vibrated. Her assistant messaged, CEOs of 2 logistic companies partnered with X Airlines have stopped negotiations, per your directive. Maya set her phone on the table, her eyes looking out at the runway where a plane was taking off. Sunlight lit up her calm face. In that moment, she thought, silence is not submission. Silence is a way to keep your enemy from knowing when the next blow will strike. She told herself this was only the beginning. In the airline's emergency meeting, the head of legal received a new notification from Horizon Global's lawyers. He skimmed it quickly, sweat breaking out on his forehead. His voice was thick when he looked up. Horizon demands full payment of the early termination penalty. The amount is up to $250 million. The room fell silent. The sound of the air conditioning hummed lightly in the heavy air. The sales director pressed his hand to his forehead, eyes closed tight. The communications director whispered, his voice shaking, one contemptuous remark, one seat change decision, destroyed everything. In the executive lounge, Maya leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. Her breathing was slow and steady. In her mind echoed her mentor's old words, don't waste your strength punching walls. Find the fracture point, press lightly, and the entire wall will collapse. Today she didn't just find the fracture point, she turned it into a door opening to a new era, where the system must reform itself, or perish. Amber sat dazed in the staff lounge, fluorescent lights highlighting her exhausted face. Her supervisor entered, stared at her for a long moment, then spoke coldly. You're suspended pending disciplinary investigation. Pack up now. She nodded silently, unable to say a word. In her mind appeared Maya's calm yet determined gaze at the check-in counter. She realized that one moment of unconscious contempt had caused everything to collapse, not just for the airline, but for her own fledgling career. She packed her things into her bag, walking out into the long hallway, her legs trembling. People watched her, but no one said anything. Silence enveloped everything. It was that very silence that had allowed such injustice to persist for so long. In the executive lounge, Maya opened her eyes, looking out at the clear blue sky. She knew her silence today wasn't to protect herself. It was to awaken those who thought silence meant acceptance. At Horizon Global headquarters, the communications team continued to monitor market reactions. On the screen, X Airlines' stock fell another 5%, and investors began to sell off. The head of communications looked at everyone, his voice firm. We will not issue a statement. The CEO's actions are clear enough. In the executive lounge, Maya held her phone, scrolling through update emails from legal and operations. Everything was unfolding exactly as she planned. No noise, no angry statements, but with an impact no one could stop. She set her phone down on the table, her eyes looking far away. In her mind appeared her mother's face from long ago, with the familiar words, when they think you're silent at the theater, let them be surprised when they realize you are only preparing for a greater victory. Today, Maya did exactly that, and she knew this was only the first step in changing a system rotten to its core. In the airline's emergency meeting room, the air was thick with exhaustion. The CEO leaned on the table, his voice hoarse. What can we do to salvage this? Any suggestions? No one spoke. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This wasn't a normal PR crisis. This was a strategic strike, calculated beforehand, and the one delivering it had no intention to negotiate. In the executive lounge, Maya received a message from her assistant. Internal airline report leaked publicly. The public is outraged. Positive reactions supporting you are surging. Maya closed her phone, leaned back in her chair, and then looked up at the ceiling. She didn't feel triumphant. What she felt was clarity. Clarity that silence was never about letting things go. Silence was about listening, analyzing, and acting at the right time, when every piece was ready to fall into place exactly as she had arranged. Maya stood up, lifted her suitcase, and walked out of the executive lounge. Every step she took was steady, light, yet resolute. She walked through the grand hall where the passengers hurried to board and staff bustled about coordinating operations. No one realized that the woman in a deep blue trench coat with an emerald silk scarf was the epicenter of the earthquake shaking the entire airline. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. X Airlines' CEO just called. They want to meet directly to negotiate. Maya didn't stop walking. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, replying with only, "No meeting. Let them learn." She slipped her phone back into her pocket, eyes looking straight ahead. She knew that if she sat down to negotiate today, they would think this was just a business collision. But she wasn't here to negotiate. She was here at Tedzor to teach them a lesson they would never forget for the rest of their lives. In the airline's operations room, the CEO read the message from his assistant, his hand clenched tightly. She refused to meet. She doesn't want to negotiate. The sales director looked up, his voice choking. Then, what do we do now? The CEO leaned back in his chair, looking up at the ceiling. Maya Thompson's name echoed in his mind, a woman he had never even heard of that morning. Now, merely mentioning her name was enough to make the entire board tremble. He sighed, his voice hoarse. We were wrong from the start, not because she's the CEO of Horizon Global, but because we forgot that everyone deserves respect. Outside at the airport, Maya continued walking toward the gate. The early sunlight shone on her sleek black hair. She thought to herself, when the powerful realize their mistake, it's often too late. But late is still better than never realizing at all. Maya stopped in front of a large glass window where the sunlight poured over the seemingly endless runway. She watched the planes taking off one by one, thinking of the thousands of passengers sitting inside, trusting completely in the system. She wondered if they knew that the system was built upon silence and complicity, how would they signaal? Her phone vibrated. A message from the chief legal officer. The Federal Department of Transportation has received the lawsuit. They are opening an investigation into discriminatory practice and the service procedures. Maya closed her phone and took a deep breath. She didn't expect change to come from just one incident, but she knew that every small crack today would accumulate, and someday the entire wall would collapse. She thought to herself, that's the real goal, not to take revenge on a few individuals, but to force the whole system to rewrite how it treats human beings. In the airline's emergency meeting room, the legal director received a call from the Department of Transportation. His voice trembled as he listened to the words about the upcoming federal investigation. He placed the phone down on the table and looked at the CEO, his voice thick. It's no longer just about contract losses. Now we're facing federal-level racial discrimination charges. This is a disaster. The room fell silent. No one dared look at each other. They understood that a single, reckless decision by a check-in staff member had exposed what they had always hidden beneath their glossy exterior, their contempt for human dignity. At the airport, Maya kept walking, pulling her suitcase past long rows of seats. Her phone vibrated with a message from her assistant. Their PR team is drafting a public apology. Maya didn't reply. She thought to herself, apologies don't change a system. Only when they're afraid of losing everything will they be forced to change. Amber sat curled up in a corner of the staff lounge, listening to her supervisor talking loudly on the phone in the hallway. His voice snapped, What do we do with her? The press is asking for the name of the staff involved in discrimination. She closed her eyes, tears silently falling. She wasn't crying because she was suspended. She cried because, for the first time in her life, she understood the true weight of a contemptuous remark. She remembered Maya's gaze upon her. No anger, no hatred, just silence. But it was that very silence that haunted her the most. It showed her how small and cowardly she truly was. At the gate, Maya sat down in the waiting area, eyes looking up at the flight information board. Her phone vibrated. A message from the head of legal. X Airlines, the CEO, is about to hold a public apology press conference. She put her phone down, leaned her head back against the bright ceiling, and thought, in the end, silence has forced them to speak. At the airline's headquarters, the CEO sat at the press conference table. camera flashes flickering endlessly. He bowed his head, his voice heavy. We apologize to Ms. Maya Thompson and Horizon Global for the unacceptable behavior of our staff. Below, reporters took notes and cameras focused directly on his weary face. One journalist called out loudly, "Will this apology be enough for Horizon Global to resume the partnership?" The CEO looked up, his eyes bloodshot. I'm not sure, but this is the least we can do." At the airport, Maya sat back in her chair, her phone resting on her lap. She didn't watch the press conference. She only watched the hurried crowds in front of her, thinking about her mother, about the days in her childhood when she was belittled just because of her skin color. She thought to herself, an apology doesn't erase pain, but if that apology is enough to make them start changing, then there is still hope in this world. Amber quietly left the staff lounge, carrying her personal bag. People avoided her gaze as she walked past. Each step felt as heavy as stone, her heart hollow. As she stepped into the main hall, she saw Maya sitting not far away. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Amber was about to turn away, but then she stopped. She took a deep breath and walked up to Maya. Her voice trembled, but she still spoke softly, just enough for the two of them to hear. I'm sorry. Not because I'm afraid of losing my job, but because I forgot how to be human. Maya looked straight into Amber's eyes, her gaze showing neither anger nor pity, only deep silence. She nodded slightly, saying nothing. Amber turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in her heart, she understood that there were apologies that didn't need forgiveness, but still had to be said, to remind herself never to repeat that mistake again. Maya watched as Amber's figure disappeared into the crowd, her heart remaining still. She knew that apology wouldn't change what had happened, but it showed that at least someone realized their mistake. Her phone vibrated. A message from the chief legal officer. X Airlines' legal team proposes private negotiations, accepting all conditions to keep the contract. Maya skimmed the message and set her phone down on the table. She closed her eyes and leaned her head back. In her mind, she thought of the millions of other women of color silently enduring contempt every day, without any power or system to protect them. She breathed slowly, thinking, if only I am respected, it means nothing. Change must happen so that all women like me, every child like I once was, will never again have to bow before injustice. The sunlight streamed through the thick glass, casting a quiet, unacknowledged radiance over her calm, yet determined face. In the airline's operations room, the CEO rested his head on the table, his hoarse voice echoing in the silence. Reach out to Horizon Global again. Tell them. We're willing to overhaul our entire staff training policies, service procedures, and anti-discrimination controls. The legal director quickly noted it down, then looked at the CEO, his eyes confused. Do you think they'll agree to resume the partnership? The CEO sighed, his shoulders trembling. I don't know, but at least we have to start somewhere. And this time, not for the money, but because it's what we should have done long ago. At the airport, Maya opened her eyes and picked up her phone. A message from the head of operations appeared on the screen. All logistics and premium route partners have officially withdrawn from X Airlines. She closed her phone, her eyes gazing into the distance. No smile appeared on her lips. Because for Maya, this wasn't victory. This was the first step in dismantling a system and rebuilding it with justice and dignity. Maya stood up, lifted her suitcase, and walked slowly toward the gate. Each of her steps sounded light yet firm on the gleaming stone floor. She passed through the crowds of passengers, none of them realizing that this petite black woman was shaking an entire power system to its core. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. X Airlines is requesting a direct meeting with Horizon Global's board. Maya stopped, looking at her phone screen, her gaze emotionless. She thought of all the times she had been rejected in silence, all the contemptuous looks, all the mocking words etched deeply into her mind. She typed her reply, short and cold. Tell them, change your system first. Only then we talk. She put her phone back into her pocket, tightened her grip on her suitcase handle, and looked straight ahead. Because she knew that real change didn't come from negotiation, but from the determination to tear down and rebuild an entire rotten foundation. In the executive lounge, Maya sat down on an empty chair near the window. The afternoon sun shone on the runway, painting the rows of parked planes in golden light. She opened her laptop and logged into Horizon Global's internal management system. Updates flashed across the screen continuously. Lists of logistics partners ceasing cooperation with X Airlines, their premium route revenue plummeting. Stock prices dropping another 4% in just an hour. Maya skimmed through it all without showing any emotion. She opened another file. a proposal for the operating system based on human dignity and social justice that she had nurtured for many years. She quickly typed new notes, her eyes resolute. Punishment is only the first step, and she thought, what matters more is building a replacement system, where respect for people is the minimum standard, not a privilege. The boarding announcement echoed through the lounge, but Maya remained seated, focused on each word she was writing as if the world outside no longer existed. In the airline's operations room, the HR director presented the emergency plan to the board. Her voice trembled. We will conduct anti-racism training for all employees. At the same time, we will build transparent procedures to prevent individual decisions from causing system-wide consequences. The CEO leaned back in his chair, his tired eyes staring up at the ceiling. He sighed, his voice hoarse. We should, have done this a long time ago. Across the city, Maya was still sitting in the executive lounge, her laptop resting on her lap. She read the latest report from the CSR team. The final message popped up. Civil rights organizations are requesting to collaborate with you to launch the Dignity First campaign. She nodded slightly. The afternoon sun illuminated her calm yet unyielding face. She thought to herself, this is the real goal. Not just to force them to apologize, but to force them to change. And if they don't, we will build a new system to replace them. Maya closed her laptop, put it into her handbag, and stood up. She lifted her suitcase and walked slowly out of the executive lounge. The airport hallway was quieter as evening fell. Warm yellow lights reflected off the stone floor, casting a long, straight shadow behind her. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. All major media outlets have published the story. Public response is strong. #Dignity First is trending #1. Maya skimmed the message, then put her phone away. She didn't smile. Inside, she felt no sense of victory. What she felt was a cold yet unwavering resolve. This is not the destination. This is only the beginning. She pulled her suitcase past empty rows of seats, her eyes fixed straight ahead. She knew that from today, every gaze would look at her with respect and caution. But what she truly hoped for was that they would look at everyone around them, regardless of skin color or voice, with respect rooted deep within. In the airline's emergency meeting room, the CEO leaned on the table, his weary voice breaking the silence. From this moment on, any act of discrimination will result in immediate termination. We have no choice. The head of legal nodded, jotting it down quickly. The HR director sat silently, eyes downcast, a bitter feeling rising within her. Because she knew this decision didn't come from an awakened conscience, but from fear of losing power and money. At the airport, Maya walked to a large window, looking out at the runway glowing under the yellow lights of dusk. Her phone vibrated. A message from the chief legal officer. They accept all compensation terms and commit to changing their system. Maya closed her phone and exhaled softly. She didn't feel relief, because she knew real change doesn't come from promises on paper. It only comes when people are afraid enough not to return to old ways and wise enough to willingly step onto a new path. Maya pulled her suitcase out of the lounge, walking down the long hallway towards the gate. The boarding announcement for her flight echoed above. Passengers around her hurried, busy with their own small worlds, unaware they had just witnessed a quiet yet seismic battle. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. PR team asks if you want to post a personal statement on LinkedIn. Maya paused in the hallway, looking at the glowing screen. She thought for a few seconds, then typed her reply. No need. Action is enough, as silence will make them remember longer than any post. She put her phone back into her pocket, tightened her grip on her suitcase handle, and kept walking. In her mind, she recalled her childhood when her mother taught her, you don't need to scream to prove your worth. Let the world hear the strength of your silence. Today, Maya did exactly that. In the airline's operations room, the CEO looked around the meeting table, his hoarse voice filling the silence. Starting tomorrow, I want the full retraining process implemented. We have no other choice. If we don't change, we will disappear. The HR director nodded, quickly writing it down. The communications director was still updating news from major outlets, his eyes vacant. He mumbled to himself, just one woman, with only silence. And she brought this empire to its knees. At the airport, Maya walked to the gate and handed her boarding pass to the staff. The check-in girl bowed her head, her voice trembling slightly. Have a safe flight, Ms. Thompson. Maya looked at the girl, her gaze calm yet profound. She nodded slightly, took her ticket back, and walked through. Inside, she felt neither pride nor arrogance, only a clear determination. This is not the end. This is only the beginning of a world built upon true dignity. Maya stepped onto the plane, welcomed by the soft music playing in the cabin. Flight attendants bowed their heads to her, their eyes cautious yet tinged with respect. She walked past the first-class rows, placed her suitcase in the overhead compartment, and sat down in seat 1A. She fastened her seatbelt, leaned back in her seat, and closed her eyes. Childhood memories flooded back. She saw herself at 7, sitting by the window of their old house, hearing her mother teach. You don't need to speak loudly to be heard. As long as you don't bow your head, the world will have to look up at you. Her phone vibrated at that softly. A message from her assistant. CSR, PR, and legal teams are ready for the next phase of the Dignity First campaign. Maya opened her eyes and looked out the window. The sunset spread across the runway, glowing with shades of orange and purple. She thought to herself, the next step won't stop at this airline. This is the start of a silent revolution. The announcement echoed in the cabin as the captain informed passengers that the flight was preparing for takeoff. Maya rested her head against the seat, eyes still gazing out the window where the sunset was fading. Her phone vibrated one last time before she switched to airplane mode. A message from the chief legal officer. X-Airlines legal team has signed the compensation agreement. $250 million will be transferred this week. They also commit to policy changes under Dignity First standards. Maya read it, closed her phone, and breathed slowly. She didn't feel victory. She only felt a quiet relief that one door had been opened, knowing there were still hundreds of locked doors out there. She closed her eyes, thinking, if necessary, I will knock on every door. And if they don't open, I will build new paths so no one will ever have to bow their head again. The engines roared as the plane began taxiing, carrying a woman in the silent storm she had unleashed upon an entire system. The plane accelerated down the runway, engines rumbling through the cabin. Maya closed her eyes, feeling the strong force lifting the giant steel body off of the ground and into the sky. She felt her heart beating slowly, steadily. In the silence of the first-class cabin, Maya could hear her own breaths, could hear the thoughts running deep within her mind. She thought of those women of color out there, silently enduring contemptuous words and disdainful gazes every day with no power to fight back. She opened her eyes and looked out the window. The night sky stretched vast and dark, glittering with the city lights far below. She whispered in her mind, "This is why I exist, not to prove my worth to them, but to pave the way for all those who have never been heard." The plane soared higher, carrying with it Maya Thompson's calm yet unyielding gaze. The plane reached cruising altitude. The cabin lights dimmed as dinner service began, with the aroma of hot coffee and toasted bread gently filling the air. Maya opened her laptop. The first slide of her proposal appeared on the screen. Dignity First, building a business system based on human dignity and social justice. She edited a few sentences, adding notes to the implementation section for international partners. The screen's glow illuminated her face, revealing her calm, focused, and resolute expression. In her mind, she thought of the X-Airlines CEO, of Amber, and of the entire system that had operated for decades without anyone daring to question it. Their apology is not enough, she thought. The only thing that will ever be enough is when they become allies of justice, not out of fear, but because they truly understand. She saved the file and closed her eyes to rest. Outside, the deep night sky sparkled with stars, as peaceful as the powerful silence she had always chosen. The plane flew through thick layers of clouds, occasionally shaking gently. Maya opened her eyes, looking at the small overhead light shining down onto her hand. In her palm were thin calluses formed over the years from holding pens, writing, signing, and building an entire empire from nothing. She remembered those early days, alone in her small studio apartment, her desk pressed against the window, staying up every night until the a.m., writing business plans. Back then, everyone laughed, saying her accent was too strange, that no one in America wanted to be led by someone who spoke like her. But Maya never forgot her mother's words. They fear your voice not because it's weak, but because it's different from theirs. And that is what makes you stronger. She clenched her hands slightly, thinking, today I use this very voice, even in silence, to make them change. And tomorrow I will teach others how to do the same so no one is ever forced into silence again. Outside the window, the night sky stretched endlessly, silent yet vast. A flight attendant approached, bowing her head and softly asking if Maya needed anything else. Maya shook her head gently, offering a faint smile. She turned to look out the window where the city lights below flickered like falling stars lost in the dark. She opened her phone to read a message from her old mentor, the one who had guided her through her early startup years. The message was simple. Proud of you, but remember, when you break a system, you must also be ready to build a better one to replace it. Maya set her phone down on the table, her gaze contemplative. She knew that when an unjust system collapses, it leaves behind a dangerous void. and it is that void that will swallow the hope of the most vulnerable. She thought to herself, Dignity First isn't just a campaign, it will be the foundation of a new ecosystem, a place where anyone, any voice is heard as a real human being. Outside, the plane continued its journey through the night sky, silent yet powerful, just like her resolve. The plane trembled slightly as it entered a zone of light turbulence. Maya remained still, her hands clasped together on her lap, eyes staring straight ahead. The captain's voice came over the intercom, reassuring the passengers, but she paid no attention. In her mind, she was organizing each next step. Tomorrow, when she landed in New York, she would have a meeting with Horizon Global's board to approve Phase 1 of Dignity First. After that, a meeting with civil rights nonprofits to expand the coalition. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from her assistant. PR team asking if you want to do a CNN interview tomorrow night. They want you to share about the X-Airlines incident. Maya looked at the message for a few seconds, then typed her reply. No, this isn't my story. This is the system's story. Focus the message on dignity first. She put her phone down and exhaled quietly. I don't need to become a symbol, she thought. I just need to be the one to clear the path. Maya tilted her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. In the gentle darkness of first class, she listened to the steady hum of the engines like the heartbeat of the universe. She thought of the women who came before her, those who never had the chance to sit in seat 1A, who never had the chance to demand justice when they were belittled. They were silent, not because they were weak, but because no one listened. She wondered if they could witness today, how would they feel? Perhaps they would be proud. Or perhaps they would just nod as if to say, finally, someone is continuing the path we could not finish. The plane shivered slightly as it passed through dense clouds. Maya opened her eyes, looking at the infinite night sky outside the window. She whispered in her mind, don't let their silence be meaningless. Make it the driving force so we never stay silent again. The cabin lights reflected on her face, revealing a calm yet unshakable determination. The plane stabilized again and the crew dimmed the cabin lights, leaving only the soft glow from the reading lamps. Maya opened her laptop, looking at the title slide of the project. Dignity First, Phase 1 and Implementation. She typed a few more notes for tomorrow's meeting. Opening a leadership training center based on dignity values, creating scholarships for black female students to study logistics and supply chain management, partnering with civil rights organizations to design fair and transparent internal policies. She paused, wondering how many people would oppose this plan. Those who feared change, who feared their power being shared, who feared that the voices they once belittled would stand as equals. She smiled slightly, not out of arrogance, but because she knew, if they are afraid, it means I am on the right path. Outside, the night sky was pitch black, but to Maya it was merely a backdrop for the light that would soon rise from the people she was determined to uplift. Maya closed her laptop, leaned back in her seat, and closed her eyes. The plane's engines hummed steadily, lulling her into a deep, quiet place where there was no noise or scrutinizing gaze from the world. Behind her closed eyelids, her mother's face appeared. The woman who had taught her when to be silent and how to speak up the right way. Who had taught her that true victory was not making others fear you, but making them never dare to belittle anyone again. Her phone vibrated softly once more. A message from her assistant. Black women CEOs in the association send their congratulations and wish to join Dignity First. Maya opened her eyes, looking at the glowing screen, the small cabin light reflecting in her deep gaze. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. This, she thought, is real power. Not making them fear me, but making everyone who was ever belittled stand up alongside me. The plane flew through the last layer of clouds, revealing the vast, star-filled night sky, illuminating the path she had chosen. The flight attendant walked down the aisle, gently checking passengers' seatbelts. Maya opened her eyes when she heard footsteps stop beside her seat. Do you need another blanket or some water, ma'am? The attendant asked softly, her voice showing nervousness. Maya looked at the young woman, seeing the worry in her eyes. She shook her head slightly, smiling, her voice low yet warm. Thank you, I'm fine. The attendant bowed her head and turned to leave, but Maya called her back. What's your name? Daniela, ma'am. Daniela, Maya said slowly, her gaze calm yet piercing. Remember, this job isn't just about serving. It's your chance to learn how to truly see people, and never judge anyone by their appearance. Daniela froze, her heart pounding. She nodded, eyes moist with tears. I understand. Thank you, ma'am. Maya leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes again. Inside she thought, if today just one person learns that lesson, then everything I've done is worth it. The plane began its ascent, the captain's voice announcing preparations for landing. Maya opened her eyes, looking at the glittering city lights in the distance like a galaxy. spread across the ground. She picked up her phone and opened the Dignity First plan. The screen lit up her face, revealing calm yet fierce determination. She reread the goal, building a business ecosystem based on dignity, where everyone is respected, not for their title, skin color, or voice, but simply because they are human. Her phone vibrated. A message from her old mentor. Tomorrow they will ask why you're doing all this. What will you say? Maya typed her reply, her gaze never leaving the window as the lights came closer. I don't do this for me. I do it for those no one listens to, and I won't stop until every voice is valued equally. The plane shook gently, passing through thin clouds, carrying a woman and her determination to rebuild the world from its roots. The plane touched down on the runway, the screeching sound fading as it slowed. Maya opened her eyes, looking at the bright lights lining the taxiway. She unfastened her seatbelt, packed away her laptop and phone neatly into her bag. The announcement echoed, "Welcome to New York. The outside temperature is 16 degrees. We wish you a pleasant evening." Maya stood up, pulled her suitcase down, and cued to exit the plane. The passenger ahead bowed slightly as they passed her. They didn't know her story, but there was something in her quiet presence that instinctively commanded respect. Stepping off the plane, Maya took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air brush against her face. She thought, tomorrow will begin. Not another battle, but a creation. The airport lights illuminated her calm yet resolute face, lighting up the path Maya Thompson had chosen, a path she would never turn back from. Maya walked out of the airport, golden lights stretching along the road into the city. She pulled her suitcase along the tiled ground, the wheels humming steadily in the quiet night. The cold wind blew through her neatly braided hair. She paused, looking up at the skyscrapers glittering with lights. To her, they weren't just structures of steel and glass. They were to the system she would continue to change, piece by piece, until it was safe and fair for everyone. Her phone vibrated. A message from her assistant. Car is waiting. Tomorrow's schedule. Dignity First Phase 2. Maya put her phone away, lifted her suitcase, and walked on. Inside, she thought, this isn't a story about what I've done. It's a story about what we all can do when we dare to be silent at the right time and speak up in the right place. She stepped into the darkness of the New York night, but her eyes remained bright, lighting the path for millions to follow, and that was the greatest victory of her life.